Joining me now here on Locked On College Football is Luke Robinson, host of the Locked On Alabama Crimson Tide podcast. Five-star plus wide receiver Ryan Williams has committed to the Crimson Tide after decommitting in the 2024 cycle. Luke, your initial reaction to this after it looked like he was maybe going to end up at Auburn. He canceled a visit to Texas. They were in the mix. Alabama landing him means what?
First of all, my initial reaction was euphoria. I've said this on several podcasts, including my own, that Ryan Williams is a special talent. I've had the good fortune of being with the HSA radio network for several years now because a couple of my friends started it. And I've been able to call a lot of games, a lot of Alabama, Mississippi All-Star games, just get a lot of state championship games. Two players stand out to me as like no-brainer. They're going to the NFL eventually, and they're going to be stars at the next level and then the very top level. That was Chris Jones from Mississippi, who is still playing for the Kansas City Chiefs, and he's just awesome, and Ryan Williams. Those two have stood out to me more than anybody else. Rashaan Evans was kind of close, but these two are head and shoulders above everybody else to me. And it's a banner year for receivers in Alabama too, and Auburn got their fair share of them. Cam Coleman and Bryce Cain and Malcolm Simmons and Perry Thompson. Those guys are all super players. And Malcolm Simmons is from my hometown, so I've been able to see him a little bit more than the others. But Ryan Williams, he's just different to me. He's just got an it factor about him. It's not that he's super fast and super quick and very elusive, but it's not like he's the most of any of those things. It's not like he only has speed. He just does whatever he has to do to score. And he's in the last state championship game, I know his team ended up losing, but they lost to Jalen Mbakwe's team, who's also committed to Alabama. And the previous state championship game before that, they lost to Mountain Brook, where I live now. And man, they just railroaded Mountain Brook. I mean, there was nothing Mountain Brook could do to stop Ryan Williams. And then, of course, in one of the All-Star games he was in, he scored a touch. He was the first one to score a touchdown in the Alabama-Mississippi All-Star game. He was phenomenal, had 2 touchdowns. I think he was the MVP. He's just a special talent from a fantastic area. It's very reminiscent of Nick Saban going down to Mobile and getting one Julio Jones in his first signing class.
Yeah, that worked out pretty well. And I think for Kalen DeBoer, this is a really monumentous recruitment for him to be able to land, because this is someone who it looked like what was going to be an indicator of, well, see, Kalen DeBoer won't recruit at the same level, won't be able to get a bunch of high-level players and whatnot, and a guy decommits when Nick Saban retires. That was to be expected, of course. But for DeBoer and his staff to go in there and have made a pitch to Ryan Williams that makes him think, yeah, Alabama is still the best place for me to go play my college football. I think that is a huge recruiting statement for Kalen DeBoer at Alabama, and it's the sort of recruit that, frankly, from the high school ranks, he wasn't going out and getting at Washington. He mostly used portal guys or players who had already been on the roster for a couple of seasons up there. This, to me, demonstrates he understands, at some level at least, maybe he won't be at the Saban level, he probably won't when it comes to recruiting, but he understands you got to go get these sorts of guys. You got to be able to have this caliber of players. I think this is a big win for Kalen DeBoer.
Well, and let's also be fair. While Kalen DeBoer hadn't gotten guys like this at Washington, recruiting Alabama are two totally different things. Washington doesn't have the same recruiting base Alabama does. Alabama per capita and Mississippi per capita put out as much as any other state. And so Alabama's next door to Florida. They're next door to Georgia. Texas is now fertile recruiting ground for Alabama, especially with Texas A&M and Texas in the conference. And Louisiana's also been good to Alabama. So, it's easier to recruit to Alabama. I don't mean that as a cut on Washington at all. I've been to Washington's campus. It's gorgeous. I love it. At the same time, let's call a spade a spade. I mean, Alabama is a bigger brand than Washington. There's no other way to spin that. And football is our thing. I mean, that's what we're known for as a state. High school football is a bigger deal. There are more top 100 players from the state of Alabama every year than there are from Washington every year. I don't think I'm talking out of school here. So he's going to have more of an opportunity to get the bigger players, is what I'm trying to say. It's not that you can't recruit to Washington. That's not what I'm saying at all. But there's not a lot of Ryan Williamses in the state of Washington. I mean, well, you got Cam Coleman here. You've got, Peter Woods here, who ended up at Clemson. I mean, the state of Alabama cranks out talent. And so he's going to have a much better opportunity to get that talent to come to Alabama, I think.
Yeah, and I think it has to settle down, any potential worry amongst Alabama fans or the alumni or whoever around the program about whether or not he'll be able to get that sort of talent, because this should have been one that, you would look at, and if he had chosen to go elsewhere, I don't think it would have necessarily been the end of the world. It's like, well, he was committed to a different coach. He was not, involved with Kalen DeBoer or anything like that. This is clearly DeBoer went out and certainly, had half a leg up having, had him committed to Alabama at once upon a time. But for him to go out and make a pitch and say this is a place to be, I think it's a big statement for Kalen DeBoer in the recruiting world down there, which is, of course, as we all know, very, very important. But I want to flip this to 2024 because Alabama's roster not going to look the same. Now, Jalen Milroe at this point in time expected to be the starting quarterback with Will Rogers recommitting to Washington. Doesn't look like there are really any other options available for Kalen DeBoer, though he has looked to try and find someone else at the quarterback spot. Jalen Milroe is going to be the guy there. There's a lot of new receivers. Only a couple played any meaningful snaps a season ago. Where does Ryan Williams fit into Alabama's wide receiver rotation for 2024?
Okay, and again, call me a Ryan Williams homer if you want to. I think he's a day one starter. I really believe that. And it's not crazy to say that. Caleb Downs was. Caden Proctor was. Ironically, both of them transferred out. But Alabama is known to start freshmen. Now, Kalen DeBoer, I don't know how much he believes in that. But I can tell you this, it's going to be very difficult to keep Ryan Williams off the field. And look, there are some guys like Kendrick Law, Kobe Prentice, just to name a couple on Alabama's team that have gotten some good minutes. Germie Bernard just transferred in from Washington. This is a guy that, he was Washington's fourth receiver. And I'm not trying to relate everything to some other schools, but I know on a few schools in the SEC, he would have been their leading receiver. So, Washington throws the ball a lot more. So you're bringing in a guy that's got experience with this offense. And I believe Alabama's just going to be fine. They've also bringing in Rico Scott and Amari Jefferson as other wide receivers in this class. They are going to have an opportunity to play some too, I believe. Look, I think Alabama's going to be fine. Nobody needs to worry about Alabama. The roster is still going to be in the top 3 or 4 rosters of the country. There's no doubt about that.
That is higher than I would place it.
Who would you have above it?
I'd have Ohio State. I would have Georgia, certainly. I'd have Oregon up there.
I might put Texas. I don't know if I'd put Oregon. I might put Texas.
I look at Texas up there. I think there are a lot of different ways. Ole Miss, I would definitely put up there. LSU, I think, has got a really good roster going into next year.
LSU and Ole Miss have the depth Alabama has.
I love what Ole Miss has done this offseason.
I like what Ole Miss has done too. Don't get me wrong. I'm glad we don't play them next year.
That's a big miss. That's a big scheduling miss.
Well, and I'll tell you something else. I've said this 100 times. You know where the SEC really screwed up? I know this is off topic. They didn't schedule Auburn to play Ole Miss. Why? With the Hugh Freeze tie-in, with the Lane Kiffin tie-in. That's the dumbest thing the SEC could have done. Now, I know they probably did it all via computer and whatever, but get Auburn Vanderbilt off the schedule. Get Auburn Ole Miss on the schedule. You've got automatic eyeballs everywhere. It doesn't matter what the records are.
Yeah, I agree with you there, and proves once again that scheduling is the biggest problem in college football, bar none, more than anything else once the actual product comes around.
And I know you need to go, but here's the biggest problem is we've got Vanderbilt in the conference. I don't mean that as a shot at Vanderbilt. I know it is one, but I don't necessarily mean it that way. What I'm saying is there's Vanderbilt, then there's a big gap to whoever's next. So if you get Vandy on your schedule, you feel like that is a win. And it shouldn't be that way. And so it makes it a little bit tougher, especially now as we inch closer and closer to all these big schools breaking away eventually.
Yeah, Vanderbilt, great baseball program. That's what they bring to the table, a fantastic baseball program, football. Here's what I always say. Every conference needs a Vanderbilt. Every conference has a Vanderbilt. It's just the reality of the world in college football. But Ryan Williams, big landing for Alabama, going to make an impact this year. I think with him and Germie Bernard, you've got the makings of a pretty solid wide receiver core for Jalen Milroe to throw the ball to. And I feel better about Alabama's roster situation with those guys than I did about a week ago. Luke Robinson, host of Locked On Alabama, all things Crimson Tide on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Luke, thanks for stopping by.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.